everybody, and welcome along to my best of 2017 list. Now this is a list of my favorite films from this year. It's not necessarily, you know, the best ones technically, or all the ones that scored like a 10 or a 9, that sort of thing. In this video, in this list, scores are out the proverbial window. These are my favorite movies. The way I've compiled this list is the movies that made me feel something and made me want to re-watch them. You know, movies that I'll buy on Blu-ray and watch over and over again, you know, I mean, because sometimes you'll get a movie that is technically really proficient, but then you might get some, you know, mindless action film that just is a lot of fun to watch, and you'll watch it over and over and it becomes one of your favorite films. So that's where I'm going with this list. And I gotta say, this was a really difficult list to create because I keep a spreadsheet of all the movies I see throughout the year with their scores. It sort of helps me gauge, you know, which movies to put on there. But to be honest, man, there were so many really good movies this year, and I had a really hard time trying to figure out which place in the top 10 these films went. But I finally managed to do it. So I'm going to kick it off though with some honorable mentions, starting with... I loved this movie so much. I mean, I absolutely loved the first one. I thought it was one of the best action movies, you know, in years. And this one I thought was a fitting continuation of the story, and not only that, it really left me hankering for part 3. Speaking of mindless action movies, look, you know, say what you want, I loved it. I thought it was just solid entertainment. Yes, it's over the top. Yes, it is totally implausible, and you've really got to suspend disbelief. Not just suspend it, but just erase it from existence entirely. But look, it was what we go to the movies to see, you know, just a good, big, loud, dumb action movie, and I dug it. Oh my god, this came so close to being in my top 10, but yeah, just the way things went, it almost made it in, but yeah, it just wasn't quite there. But look, I was really surprised by how great this movie was. It was refreshingly original, it told a great story, and I really dug it. Another one that came so close to the top 10. Look, M. Night Shyamalan is back. I mean, previously with The Visit, that was definitely his return to form, and he's carrying the torch with this one. It was a great, great film, and I'm not going to spoil the ending, but if you've seen my review, if you've seen the movie, you know why I love this movie so much. And this was probably the one that I had the hardest time moving out of the list. It was really, really good, but the only reason it didn't make it in there was because as much as I enjoyed watching it at the time, and I've bought it on Blu-ray, I haven't revisited it. Not as much as all the other movies in my top 10, so that's the only reason why this didn't quite make it. But that being said, let's get into number 10. Stop, just stop. I know what you're saying. How can I possibly have this movie in my top 10 when the likes of It and Get Out and Split didn't make it in? But again, you got to keep in mind, this is my list, my personal favorites, and I loved this movie. I really did. Yes, it's been done before, but not quite in this sort of way, and I just had so much fun watching it. I really wanted to go back to the theater and watch it again. And the fact that my review was a bit of a success, where the writer of the film, you know, gave me some great compliments and shared it and stuff. Yeah, you know, that kind of added a little to it. And here's another one that I know so many people are going to be like, how can you have this in your top 10? Let's face it, this has been one hell of a year for divisive movies as far as audience reactions, but not just things like, oh, you know, yeah, I didn't really like that. Oh, but I did like that. There has been so much hatred and vitriol being spewed on the internet, and yeah, it's been really strange. And so yes, look, I totally understand there's going to be a lot of people out there who didn't like this movie, but for me, being a hardcore DC Comics fan, it was so entertaining to me. You know, I loved watching it. I had a lot of fun. For me, it ticked all the boxes. And more importantly, it did what it set out to do. No, not piss off a whole bunch of people. It set out to be a good, entertaining action flick, and that's what I got from it, and I loved it. Initially, this movie was going to be a lot higher up on my list, but I rewatched it just last night. Yeah, that's how I spent my New Year's Eve. Woohoo! And, to be honest, yeah, I had to put it back a little bit. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad film or anything like that, obviously, not being in my top 10 for the year. Look, this movie was so incredibly creative and unique and different, and it did something that no film has ever really done before, in as much as it set so many sequences and things that happen in the movie to the beats of music. I had so much fun watching this movie. It is definitely one I can watch over and over and over again and never get tired of. So yeah, loved Baby Driver. And speaking of fun times at the movies, this wasn't one of them. I went into this movie not knowing really what to expect, being that I'm not really much of an art house movie fan, but what I got, oh man, it rattled me to the core. This is a film that I've put it in my list. Well, I mean, aside from the fact that I gave it a perfect 10 because I just couldn't fault it, it was one of those movies that definitely made me feel something. It wasn't something I liked feeling. It was kind of this black, depressing sort of a mood, but the fact that it did that was such an accomplishment. And yeah, this film definitely belongs on my list. Again though, you know, with this list in terms of movies that I could watch over and over again, yeah, this one might be a bit selective. On to another depressing film, Logan. Oh my god, one of the best superhero movies ever made. If you can even really call it a superhero film, because this movie was so gritty and realistic. It gave us such a real version of Wolverine. And it was a darker take on the character. It was a sad, depressing kind of a movie with, I guess, maybe a little glimmer of hope towards the end. But yeah, certainly not an uplifting kind of a film. Yeah, but who knew that an X-Men film could bring tears to your eyes? So I've already mentioned before that I am a DC fanboy. Look, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Marvel movies, even though none of them actually appeared on this list. But whether you're a DC or Marvel fan, you gotta admit, Wonder Woman was a cracking good movie. This is the first time we've seen this character on the big screen in a live action film, and what they delivered was an absolute cinematic masterpiece. Aside from a kick-ass female hero played by an actress who I never thought could pull it off, it also proved to all the people who have been rubbishing the DC extended universe in all the cinematic movies that, you know, maybe there's hope. Now, this is a movie that was a bit misled by the title, because there ain't no war. I mean, yeah, there was a battle, there was some action scenes, but I didn't realize until I came out of it that the war in question was an internal conflict. This movie was such a fantastically done character piece. It had some beautiful imagery, it had some scenes that adhered to the screenwriting rule of show don't tell in such a masterful way. And as far as being a technical achievement goes, my god, you don't get better than this movie. I mean, all the CG characters in this, all the apes and monkeys and everything were so freaking realistic. It was a fitting end to the current Planet of the Apes trilogy, and I absolutely loved it. Now here's one that I really had to wrestle with, because Obviously, look, if you've been following my channel, you know I am a massive Star Wars fan. I am obsessed with Star Wars. Star Wars is my freaking life. And this is the only movie this year that I've seen 3 times in the cinema so far. And look, it's another movie that I realize a lot of people don't like it. That is totally fine. But for me personally, I thought this movie deserved a place among the original trilogy, which the prequels and Force Awakens I didn't quite get. There were so many moments in this movie that made me feel like that 10-year-old kid watching Empire Strikes Back again for the first time. And this was definitely a case where I had to push my bias aside and, yeah, kind of fathom the quality of movies rather than the rewatchability in this case, because out of all the movies that I've seen this year, I'll probably be watching this one more than any of them for the rest of my life. Well, I finally saw it. I only just went and saw this movie today, and I've been holding off doing my top 10 list because of this movie. I had a feeling it was going to get in somewhere in my top 10. I didn't realize quite how high on the list. This movie was utterly extraordinary. To the point where when I was cutting my review together, I was starting to feel emotional, you know, just looking at the movie clips I was putting into it. It was so heartwarming. But not only that, you know, in terms of making us feel something, it just reminded me about the importance of family and remembering the people in our lives who have come and gone. This movie delivered such an important message. It was so brilliantly done, from the animation to the music. Everything about it was just an absolute joy to watch, and yeah, I absolutely loved this movie. But not as much as I loved Guys, I said in my review of this film that it was my favorite movie of this year, and things haven't changed. This movie was it just worked on so many levels. Aside from giving us a glimpse behind the scenes of how The Room was created, you know, which is one of the worst movies ever made, and by worst, I mean best. It also told a really great, heartwarming story of friendship about these two guys. There's one guy who is this really weird, quirky human being that no one can understand, and this other guy who is, you know, trying to fulfill a dream, and the two of them somehow just came together and made it work. It's the kind of movie that even if you haven't seen The Room, you're still going to appreciate it, and like I said in my review, it's going to make you want to see The Room so badly. But for those of us who have seen The Room and loved it, oh man, it just worked on a whole other level, and there was just nothing I could fault about this movie. And the one thing that I remembered about watching it that put it as the #1 movie for me this year was how I felt throughout the whole runtime. I mean, I was seriously sitting there with the biggest smile on my face throughout the whole thing. I mean, yeah, it was partly because I got the joke, you know, because I'd seen The Room so many times and I understood the little references and gags. So I guess, you know, it did sort of make that a more enjoyable experience for me. But at the same time, you know, it was just such a wonderful film to watch. Everything about it. And above all, James Franco's performance as Tommy Wiseau. Yeah, I mean, that guy became Tommy Wiseau. He was not James Franco. There were moments in the movie I had to remind myself that I was watching James Franco on screen. It was an absolutely phenomenal performance. One of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. So there you go, guys. That is my top 10 for 2017. Now, please don't start the hateful comments below. I realize, I know that there's going to be a lot of movies in my list that you're not going to agree with, but this is my list, okay? Look, I mean, there's probably going to be other lists where there's going to be movies that I'm sort of like, well, how did that make it on there? We all see movies in a different way. You know, there's 7 billion people on this planet. We all watch movies with a different set of eyes. And we bring into movies and take away things, you know, based on our own life experiences. It's such a subjective art form, film is, and yeah, but you know, at the end of the day, we're here talking about movies. I mean, you know, there's one thing that we all have in common is our love of cinema. And I want to thank you all for being with me over this past year. It has been such an amazing year. I've met so many wonderful other people, great other film reviewers on YouTube, and some friends in person as well. I'm looking at you, Taylor and Jake, but I would love to hear what your top 10 movies for the year were, or top 5, or top 11, or however many you like. So let's get talking. Drop me some comments either here or on Facebook. All the social media links are in the description below because I like to talk about movies and I would love to talk about movies with you. See you next time.
Click subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest movie reviews. Skynet will be taking over any day now, so what have you got to lose? Nyah.
All the social media links are in the